Good afternoon, YouTube. We're out here on a beautiful, warm, sunny Florida afternoon to talk about my favorite piece of woods or field equipment. Actually, probably my favorite everyday carry piece of gear too. So here it is. You probably saw the title. It's my Swiss Army knife, and this is the Huntsman model, which is my preferred knife. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So there's a ton of videos on YouTube about Swiss Army knives already. That's why I kind of deliberated about whether or not I was going to do one. In the end, I decided to go ahead and do it because it's my favorite piece of equipment and I have so much experience with it that, hey, what could it hurt, right? If you've already seen videos on YouTube about Swiss Army knives or you already own one, hey, you don't have to watch it. So here's mine. I'll just go through the features real quick and maybe demonstrate some of what the knife can do so you can get an idea of how I use mine. And if you're a Swiss Army knife user or lover, you can comment below and talk about your favorite model and why you like that one the best, because that's a big debate, right? So there's all different Swiss Army knife models. This is the Huntsman model. The reason I like it is the features it has seem to fit what I do, and that's the thing with Swiss Army knives. If you're into, let's say, cross-country skiing, or I don't know, you're a computer guy, or you're a fisherman, you might have a different model preference than me. So for what I do, this is my favorite model, and we'll go through the features one by one. I guess one of the first things I could bring up was a aftermarket replacement that I did for the toothpick, which is this. It's called the Firefly. So I took out the toothpick, got rid of it. Never really understood the need for a toothpick in a Swiss Army knife anyway, because if you need a toothpick, you got a Swiss Army knife. It's not too terribly difficult to make one. So I didn't need to be carrying one around. And this is a Ferrocerium rod. So what that means is you make a spark with it that can ignite a fire. And what that does is give my Swiss Army knife the capability of not only having a cutting tool with me at all times, but in an emergency I always have a way to make fire. And how you would use that with the knife, how I like to use it, I don't know, I guess everybody's got their own way, but I use the back of the saw, and then you generate your spark like that using the back of the saw. And I guess I can actually demonstrate. I got a little wood gasifier stove here. Let me get my full-size Ferrocerium rod and I'll demonstrate how to light this up. Stand by. Okay, so here's my my Ferrocerium rod that I use in the field. My preferred method for using it is to just use the striker that comes with it. Very efficient with that. But in this case, we'll just try to use the back of my Swiss Army knife saw, which has a sharpened 90-degree edge. So you need that. You need a sharp edge. I don't like, or I don't recommend using the blade of your knife for striking a Ferrocerium rod, because I feel like you just unnecessarily wear out your knife. But you do have to exercise some caution with using the saw, because obviously this end's kind of pointy. My hands are kind of rough, so I don't mind some marginal contact with that pointy edge. Just some side pressure on it to kind of hold it in place and keep it from folding up. And then I will just simply strike down into my fire. Now I like to try to pull the rod back like that. And there we go. Put a little more fat wood on top there. Get this sucker going. So yeah, it'll be a little fireside chat with the Swiss Army knife. So that is one feature of my Swiss Army knife that I really appreciate out in the field, which is the ability to strike a Ferrocerium rod with the saw. And then the saw can obviously also saw wood. So here's probably the typical size piece of wood that I'd want to be using this saw on. Anything bigger than this, and I think you're really trying to bite off more than you can chew. But this is about perfect for feeding this stove here. So to demonstrate that real quick. So that's breaking something like that by hand, maybe just a little bit too much to bust off by hand. But if you have a knife like this where you can take it down, that makes it very manageable. So now I could feed my stove or my fire or whatever I'm doing with my knife. So listen, a lot of guys got Leathermans. I own a Leatherman, right? A Leatherman Wave I have. Great tool. Has a lot of the same features that this Swiss Army knife has. So why do I prefer the Swiss Army knife to the Leatherman? For me, it's all about portability. So the Leatherman is just probably about 3 times as heavy. It's just bulkier. Doesn't sit in my pocket. Well, this thing here, I put this in my pocket, it just disappears. I forget about it. It's like it's not even there. I think it weighs 3.5 ounces or something. The way you see it here, 3.4 ounces. It's just much more convenient and carryable. It's an everyday carry item for me. This knife's in my pocket every single day in my front left pocket. So that's why I'm not a Leatherman guy. Now, if you are a Leatherman person, God bless you. I don't hold anything against them. I own one. I just find them a little bit too bulky for everyday carry. And then as far as regular jackknives or other type of knives, there's just no comparison. This is so feature rich. This has so much more utility to it than a regular jackknife. There's no way I would carry for the same weight and size a jackknife to this. So anyway, moving on with the other features. So we talked about the Ferrocerium Rod. We talked about the saw. On the other side, I have a pair of tweezers. This doesn't get used too much. Once in a while, I'll pull a tick off or something with it. It is convenient to have. And they just came out with a, Swiss Army knife just came out with a Farmer X model, which is an aluminum scaled knife with a lot of the same features as this one. And I just put an order in for it. We're going to try it out, see if I like it. I always liked the Farmer model, but I never bought it because it didn't have the scissors on it. And I think the scissors are an indispensable option. But anyway, this one does. We'll try it out, but I am definitely going to miss the Ferrocerium Rod and the tweezers and some other functions if I do end up going with that model as a daily carry. But anyway, moving on the back, you can see there's an awl, and it also has a small hole in it, and this is a misunderstood feature of this awl. That's actually a sewing needle. So I've honestly never used it. I've never used it, but it's always been comforting to have, because if you're out in the field and you have some dental floss with you, just watch some YouTube videos on how to use this sewing needle, because you could, let's say you blew out the zipper on your backpack or something, any kind of heavy material, you could actually use this to sew the thing back together and just keep your gear intact until you get back to civilization. And then the awl feature, I'll use that once in a blue moon, but honestly, this is probably this and this next feature here, this Parcel Hook, are probably the least used features of my Swiss Army knife. I used to use the Parcel Hook a lot for picking my pot up off the fire, but honestly, I've just gone to the can opener or the bottle cap opener, which both of those work just as well to grab it by the bail and pick it up off the fire. So the Parcel Hook is probably the least used feature of my knife. Still, you know, I use it once in a blue moon, like if I'm helping my daughter grab hay bales by the strings. It comes in handy for that. Just helps you from wearing out your hand. But I don't know, I guess I could get by without that. The corkscrew, on the other hand, is used all the time. Not because I'm a drunk. This thing is super handy for untying knots. So if I get a knot and a piece of string or something, I'll work this corkscrew in there and just basically pull that thing loose. I use it all the time out in the field for that. And of course, I do open an occasional bottle of wine with it. So there's the corkscrew, indispensable, and I'll definitely miss that on the Farmer X model if I choose to carry that. Ooh, fire's getting a little warm. I'll move over some. All right, next up, let's see. I guess we'll work from this side over. So this is the flathead screwdriver and bottle cap lifter. So, like I said, honestly, I don't do a whole lot of screwing screws into stuff out in the field. Where that comes in handy is like around town carry, or like at my house, you know, you're just tightening down, let's say like a light cover or something, and you don't want to run all the way out to your shop and go get a retriever screwdriver. It's nice to have that feature, but out of the field I don't use it. This gets used to pull pots off the fire more than anything out there, or as like a little pry bar or something. And it also has that that notch in there, and what that's actually used for is cutting wire. So what you do is you take your piece of wire and you lay it up against that notch, and then you take the blade of your knife, bring it down, and then you basically either spin your wire or you spin your knife, and that kind of like cuts the sleeve of the wire, and then you pull it off and it strips the wire. Maybe used it for that twice in my life. I don't know. Not a feature I use a lot. The can opener. I've opened a can or two. I'm not big on canned foods out in the field. Pretty much freeze-dried everything for me. Gets a little boring after a while, but again, just taking my pot off the fire, that's what I use it for. Now we're getting into the meat of it. The scissors. So you get a lot of guys that'll say, scissors, you never use them. That's not really, you know, a manly, useful function. Man, look at that wood gas stove just going at it. I love that. I love how those things work. The beauty of them is they just emit very little smoke or embers come off the top. It's so efficient. Let me saw some more wood up for that thing while we're sitting here. Yeah, I'll use that saw for making notches, or mostly I do a lot of whittling, so you'd be surprised how much you use a saw when you're whittling. Most people think it's just all knife work, but there's a lot of saw stuff happening there. Okay, moving on. Where was I? The scissors, yeah. So I use these scissors for all kinds of stuff out in the field. I use it for you know, cutting fishing line, trimming finger and toenails. Not kind of gross, but just cuts them right off, man. And I got thinner nails on my fingers and toes. I know some of you guys got some real eagle talons, but for me, this thing works great. And then finer cutting, like let's say you're cutting some moleskin for a blister, and you got to cut that circle in the middle. Man, a pair of scissors is real handy for that. I've tried like cut duct tape. You ever try to cut duct tape with a knife? It's hard enough with a pair of scissors. So stuff like that, man, these scissors really come in handy. And I'm super glad I have that feature on here, and that's what kind of turned me on to that Farmer X model. Next up is the saw. We talked about that. Then you got your main blade. does not lock. And yeah, I wish it did, to be honest with you. But it's very usable as is. You just have to understand the limitations of the knife, not having a lock on it. And honestly, once you get used to it not having a lock on it, you just kind of you just get by just fine. You operate okay. And it's a good size. And you just rip out this super rough pine tar feather stick here. Boom. Just like that. Woo! So, very handy size. I'll use this for my rougher whittling. Of course, any cutting tasks I got to do, food, whatever. Works great. And then for me, as an avid whittler, this small blade is money for that. This is exactly what you want to have for whittling. And I actually, ooh man, almost cut myself right there. Thing is so sharp. Keep it like a razor. But mine, well, all Swiss Army knives come from the factory with a like a little carrying piece over here. It's like a hook with a grommet on it, and I actually ground that off on mine so that it's more conducive to whittling, because that piece kind of gets in your way when you're trying to do finer work. So yeah, my whittling blade. So there's my Swiss Army knife. Like I say, one of the most useful tools I own, and you'll never see me out in the woods without it. It just ends up, it's kind of like the pickup truck of knives. You don't think you need it until you got one, and then you find yourself using it all the time. And I can't imagine getting away without it, getting by without it out in the woods. I use it that much. The scales, this one has plastic scales on it. I've actually got a crack in this one right here. It's starting to crack down. It'll eventually chip out. I ordered some new scales, 10 bucks on eBay. About every 5 years I got to rescale this thing because it rides in my pocket, it gets dropped. These scales will break. Rescaling it is like an 8-year-old could do it. You just pry these off with another knife and then pop your new ones back on. You can pick all different colors. The ones I got coming in are yellow. I wanted something high visibility in case I put my knife down. I don't walk away from it and forget it. But a lot of guys will complain about the scales on them. They want the ALOX version because the scales aren't tough. Like I said, I get about 5 years out of a pair of scales, and they're just fine. Nothing wrong with them, and it's easy as heck to rescale them. The knife itself, I get them on eBay, like the Huntsman model. You just go on eBay, search Victorinox Huntsman, and they get these airport seizures where I don't know, whoever gets them from the airport, but they sell them in bulk. But you can get a knife like this one right here, great shape, 15 bucks. Don't go to, don't go to the store and buy one new for $40. So my phone timed out because of high heat. Too hot for the phone. That's Florida for you, man. But anyway, I was saying, buy your Swiss Army knife used on eBay. You can get great deals there. So one feature I forgot to cover that is often overlooked, right on the tip of the can opener, is a Phillips head screwdriver. So that is designed to unscrew and screw in Phillips head screws, even though it's only got, the flathead pattern. It's not the cross pattern that you're used to for Phillips heads. It works just fine in a pinch for getting a Phillips head in or out. And that's what these knives are for. They're for the, small stuff just to get you through. It's not a complete replacement for a hatchet, a big knife, and all that. But, if you're just going out weekend camping or on a long distance trek where weight is an issue, you could definitely get by with just one of these. Guys do it without any knife at all, so there you go. But that's my review of my Swiss Army knife Huntsman. Indispensable tool for me. Like I say, my favorite piece of equipment because I just use it so much. I appreciate it. And you know, I didn't really even get into like specific tasks that I do with mine. If you followed me around for a year, you could see all the stuff I do with this thing and put together with it. To me, it's just the right size, not too big, not too small. It's really the Goldilocks of knives. Hope you enjoyed the review. Have a good one.